Committee, Naabik'íyáti Committee, and the Navajo Nation Council, approving oil and gas operating agreements between the Navajo Nation and the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company for Tohatchi Wash, Beautiful Mountain, and Porcupine Dome. This legislation, again, is sponsored by myself, Seth Damon, Speaker of the 24th Navajo Nation Council. The presenters that will be presenting today is Mr. L. Sosi and Mr. James McClure from Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, and I do believe they might have others on the line too as well that might help support the initiative or support any questions or comments that that might be made during the work session. Again, there's no time frame on the work session for both the questions and comments, but again, there is the only time frame is 20 minutes on the board for Mr. L. Sosi and his team to go ahead and present before the Nation Naabik'íyáti Committee. So without further ado, on the presentation of legislation 0232-21, I think more importantly, just to hear what the legislation is and what it's doing, I'll go ahead and turn the floor over this time to Mr. L. Sosi. And your team, Mr. Sosi, you do have 20 minutes on the board.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yes, I'd just like to say thank you to Chairman Damon, and then also members of the 24th Navajo Nation Council, Office of the President and Vice President's Office, along with the judicial branch, staff of the Navajo Nation, the ones that are on the line, and then also all the listeners, whether it's by phone or on Facebook. Leonard L. Sosi in Shiedo and the Hinani den Enschle Hotson it Ebashin net or den Ethachi ni dashet Shedokia ani dashanella. I have been on the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company board for 11 years, and then out of the 8 years, I have been the board chair of the company. So we do appreciate the time and opportunity that is given to us to expound and to elaborate on legislation 0232-21. Ecuador Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company. Nal sauce be etana hotit ahi nlenigi to hotelia diko helium jubedi nenla nilch zolle to yini chit neck go arje betet do and the ya nal kha do and the biked that a glato because that it hard to hot ego a bahazno in Kodon kitchen ya ben kisnahul net dolly. Adoshin hen at the kitchen, Toshin had londla edo hot edole. So with that, I'd like to give the time over to our CEO, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. James McClure, to present along with the management, the team that we have for our company. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman El Sosi. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm assuming you can. Great. So I've also got with me today my Vice President of Geoscience, name is Mark Andreessen, and our Vice President of E&P Operations, Exploration and Production Operations, Mr. John Wright. We're going to try to walk through a presentation. I believe the presentation was sent to all the council delegates today. It does have some confidential information in it, so it was my intent not to be showing it on screen today, but I'll try to walk through the presentation. Hopefully everyone has it nearby, so when I reference the slides, you'll be able to follow. Some context as I begin. We've been working over the last year and a half with the Minerals Department and the Department of Justice on these agreements. The focus of these agreements are primarily for helium development. The language of the operating agreements, however, does include any other types of development with respect to oil or any natural gas, but the primary initiative here for these three agreements is with helium development. As Speaker Damon said in the reading of the legislation, the three helium agreements are located in two chapter areas. The Tohatchi Wash operating agreements located near Tisnatspas, and the Beautiful Mountain and Porcupine Dome agreements are located in the Sanasti chapter. And again, I like Delegate Crotty said, I want to welcome the Sanasti chapter officials today. Our primary, as I move to slide number 3, maybe just kind of maybe some more context. We started working with the Minerals Department in the late kind of the third quarter of 2020. We're able to finalize the language of the agreements in mid 2021. We then went and tried to spend time with the chapters where this activity is intended to try to explain our initiative. And ultimately, that's now resulted in us moving through the RDC committee and now to the Naabik'íyáti committee for discussion and debate. So as I move to slide 3, and I'll try to get through this presentation quickly because I know we only have 20 minutes. But helium investments, we did have a workshop in Albuquerque on Saturday for several of the council delegates able to attend. I'm glad that we've got some other council delegates online today. This slide you probably have seen before from me, and it's a question about why invest in helium. Well, to start, helium is in very short supply around the world, and it's very important to several industries that impact humanity. Those specifically are the medical industry, the semiconductor and computer industry, and then space industry. Helium has some unique physical and chemical properties. It's an inert gas, and we're going to talk about what an inert gas is on the next slide. It's non-reactive substance. It's low density, lighter than air, non-toxic, odorless, non-flammable. And I know there's been a lot of information, questions about what is helium. I think the key thing to understand is that it is a non-toxic, odorless, non-flammable gas that is found in the subsurface. It's designated by the USGS and the Department of Interior as a critical mineral. And as I said earlier, it does support the medical industry. It's providing coolant support for MRI machines and a non-reactive atmosphere with semiconductor manufacturing, which is in all of our phones and computers. And as I said, most people are aware of helium through party and weather balloons, but it has many other uses, primarily in the aerospace industry as well. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Andreessen to talk about slide number 4. So Mark, are you unmuted?
Yeah, I just unmuted. I'm assuming everyone can hear me.
Yes.
On that. If everyone looks at slide 4, what is an inert gas, and just to kind of add a little bit to what Mr. McClure just told you, they are the noble gases. They fall in the red box on the periodic table, and all of these noble gases have the same properties as being odorless, colorless, and chemically non-reactive. And as you see below, the reason they're not reactive is that their electron shells are completely filled with electrons. So that means they're stable. So just everything in nature wants to be stable and balanced. And all the noble gases are stable and balanced, which means they will not react. You can breathe them in and breathe them out, and they will not react with anything in a person's body on that. If we go to the next slide, slide 5, just in general, what is the helium system? First off, I just want to say in the past and present, helium up to the present, helium discoveries were made accidentally as a byproduct of oil and gas exploration. And NOG has now focused on purposely looking for helium. As Mr. McClure said, it's in short supply, so we are trying to purposely explore for helium deposits in the subsurface. And you probably have heard the Navajo Nation is particularly blessed with a lot of very high concentration rich helium deposits, some of the highest that you see in the world. If we go to slide 6, these are the kind of the key points to take away from that, to remember. One, helium isn't a fossil fuel. And the second is you're breathing helium every day. It's constantly being emitted from the earth right now. And it's at very low concentrations. It comes out in about 5.2 parts per million, but it's being emitted. So it's something that isn't toxic to anyone. It is non-reactive. As I mentioned before, the Navajo Nation is blessed with some of the richest helium in the world. We're looking at their deposits as much as 8 to 10% that are found. And in comparison, I would say most helium developments that are happening around the world are developing helium with concentrations of less than 1%. The helium is also produced typically associated with nitrogen, which is another odorless, tasteless, and non-toxic gas. Matter of fact, we're breathing 78% nitrogen right now. At any rate, the impact we think will be small to the communities because the helium deposits tend to be small. So it is going to require a small number of wells to develop, and the wells will also be relatively short-lived. So community impact will be short. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Mark. So slide number 7 talks about the potential value to the Navajo Nation. In summary, these agreements call for a upfront bonus to be paid by Navajo Nation Oil and Gas to the Navajo Nation. There'll be an annual scholarship requirement, rental payments during the exploration phase. And then when production is put in place, you'll have royalty and a PILT, or a payment in lieu of tax, that goes to the nation. Additionally, there are land rentals that occur during the production phase. In a combined sense, the bonuses we're talking about for these 3 operating agreements are about a little over $750,000. And the combined scholarships start with an initial payment of $75,000 and then build up depending on the number of producing wells for each operating agreement. The royalty rate on these agreements is 20%, and there's a 5% PILT that's added. And these are, as we negotiated with minerals, they're very competitive. In fact, probably, the royalty rate's probably a bit higher than you would see in a federal lease with the Department of Interior. In addition, there are sales taxes that would be captured by the Navajo Nation for some of the capital and operating expenses that NOG will spend to develop these wells, these fields, and then also potential payments in an aggregate sense for what we made the assumption of is 8 prospects being successful. So that's instead of just these 3 that we're talking about today, if 8 were successful, the Navajo Nation would see a revenue stream of up to $200 million. When you couple that with knowing that our total prospect area has identified up to 37 prospects to date, actually it's probably closer to 40 now, you can see that the potential for this business, it's approaching $1 billion opportunity for the Navajo Nation. The next few slides are a series of summaries, either at the nation level or at the lease level or the operating agreement level. So slide 8 is the annual revenues that the Navajo Nation should expect if we're successful for 8 prospects. Then we start diving into each prospect area. So the first is the Sanasti chapter activity. We have 2 operating agreements there, one Beautiful Mountain and the second is Porcupine Dome. You can see that these areas are highlighted in red on slide number 9. They are to the east of Beautiful Mountain in the Sanasti chapter area. We did have some conversations with the chapter about this. There was some concern that maybe we were going to be drilling and developing on Beautiful Mountain, and that is not the case. We are to the east of that area. The next slide, slide 10 and 11, talk about, highlight some of the grazing rights permittees that we're having to engage with to ensure when we do move to activity in the field that they are aware and compensated for any impact. The Sanasti revenue splits are as shown on slide 12. So we are highlighting the fact that we've got all the capital, all the risk capital is spent by NOG, and ultimately that's where the risk lies. We're looking at about $69 million of invested capital for NOG up front at the Sanasti chapter area, and then operating expenses over the life of the production that approach 120 million. The sales tax and then royalty then exceed $100 million that's then provided to the Navajo Nation, and with scholarships that do occur as well. Now, one thing that we have elected to do is to take some of our profit and to share that with the local chapter. So in the case of Sanasti, given the volumes of helium that we're looking to extract, it's approaching, it's almost $1.7 million is what that 1% highlights. The remaining profit does stay with NOG, and that ultimately is used to run our business and to look for the next set of opportunities. And again, as I highlighted earlier, we have almost 40 helium prospects that we would like to develop on the Navajo Nation to generate the revenues that I mentioned earlier. And then slide 13 is a slide that shows the annual revenues. The slide 14 then moves to the Tisnatspas chapter, again highlighting the grazing permittees that we're interacting with. Tohatchee Wash revenues, it's a smaller prospect area here. The positive thing about Tohatchee Wash, however, is that it is ready to produce. There is a well on the Tohatchee Wash area that was worked over by NOG and the Minerals Department in 2015, and does have the capability of producing high quantities of helium. And we're ready to hook it up with success with the with a new pipeline. Again, slide 16 highlights the revenue splits, no different than what we discussed with Sanasti. As we then move forward to slide 18, the benefits for the local chapters are highlighted. We talk about jobs, so we definitely see contract labor jobs and field operations roles that we'll need to hire in these regions. Also, I mentioned the 1% profit share. But I think one of the more important aspects that we've tried to communicate to the chapters is that NOG is an entity of the Navajo Nation. We're owned by the Navajo people, And we see ourselves as an ideal partner when working with the community. So that is something we've been working really close to ensure that the communities are well informed of our activity. The next few slides get into what to expect. And I know that we're getting short on time, so I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. We know we have seismic and activity. We just conducted an aeromag survey, and we also will have soil sampling that's been occurred. And you can see that all the way through slide 28. That is our preliminary work to identify the opportunity. And then as we move into the drilling and operations phase, we will have activities that ultimately require a drilling pad to be generated. We work real closely with the Navajo Nation departments of archaeology and paleo, land, EPA, and so forth before we begin, and we ultimately receive approval before we can move forward. The slides up through slide 37 highlights the drilling phase. We can talk with any questions that are asked about how we protect fresh water, and that's shown on slide 36. Finally, my final slide is on slide 39, is just to talk about NOG has worked closely with a medicine man to help us on blessing ceremonies for these lands. Before we do any activity, we want to ensure that we conduct those ceremonies to continue to see blessings from Mother Earth as we look for this helium development. So I know that's a very rapid review of our slide deck. I'm anxious to answer any questions that the council delegates might have, and we have a video that we can show as well that highlights some of the drilling activity. And I don't know, Leonard, if you had anything more to add. And if not, then we'll open it up to questions.
Well, if speaker would allow me to add a little bit here. I know we're out of time.
Thank you very much. With that, Mr. L. Sosi and Mr. James McClure. Colleagues, let me go to the floor as if there's any comments or questions at this time. I don't have anybody in the queue.
Speaker,
Yes.
Delgado South.
Honorable so, floor is yours.
Yeah. So I did Navajo Nation Naabik'íyáti that are on the line. I did speaker. Thank you for chair. Thank you for allowing me this time, and again for the Navajo Nation Oil and Gas presentation pertaining to the work session of this particular legislation. So, first of all, I would like to see if the motioning party and the seconding party who tabled this legislation is on the line, and that will be from expect that answer from the Speaker's office to see if these individuals are on the line, because they request the work session, and number one is that I'm just hoping that it's not a form of delaying at least here. The presentation that has been provided to the council or to the Naabik'íyáti committee is a legislation that already went to the council or to Naabik'íyáti committee, and with this, looking at the agenda, and it says Naabik'íyáti committee work session. And this legislation was tabled at the council level. Oh, yego, sakis do, yego, haro la ba na the kill yeah. But the basic thing is to allow this particular lease is putting the Navajo Nation in the driver's seat of these type of explorations. The Navajo Nation has made leases, approved leases for companies that truly just do business on the Navajo Nation, but they, what I'm getting to is they're not looking at the interest and the well-being of the nation. We do have laws pertaining to royalties, and yes, we do get payments from royalty from the companies that do business on the nation pertaining to our natural resources. But a lot of those profits has left the nation. Across the Navajo way out there past the Navajo Nation. These companies, it benefited these companies. With this particular legislation, it will put the Navajo Nation, our tribal enterprise, control of our own natural resources. We're in the driver's seat of these matters. We know that these companies has really did damage to the Navajo Nation, such as the Kerr McGee, leaving some of these unrehabilitated. At the same time, majority of the profits will be coming back to the Navajo Nation, and it will benefit our Navajo people in the future. You look at how Peabody was, the lease was made for Peabody. Yes, we did get the coal royalty funding. A lot of the profits were taken off the nation. Peabody, areas mined or abstracted and did not clean them up, and they left. o kade an he ya be kin di lado be ni indo ba hui ya ko be na ya these are natural resources that we have in our grounds here. And I really support that. The Navajo Nation is in control. The Navajo Nation enterprise is in control of this matter, because helium is in an area that an uncharted area that I think we can really prosper on. Oh, what up, alcohol. Nas بدأتيسنا وهنزا هذا جو نن ليزر زاهد جو بتاعنا جو جو باهن بس هذا عند النك أشياء جو باهن بس إيشان دار هذا سكيا تشيوس إني باللي هذا خايجي هذا خليت إلا هذا أبيس كان من لغز سو جو بتاعنا أشون أخذت جو نن لنيت سكيزت نب واشنطن دون ده نكت إني جو تيرو ناتو هذه الشيء كتاشين سقياد ليني بأفتحنا نب واشنطن صلاقي بأفتحنا أني بناتش كده بباهي زيادة لسلو ben hidnabel kin bebe kisne sisodes aha ben na destini so de hoste beto ni do ya ade hoste beto ni do ya be so lenike ni royalty ni ledo le nte ya ni lahaki ya the prophets will be leaving the nation as the company of Tacitus. Tacitus kodon khan niyande alo tashin sagoto ya ko so I want to explore on the nation ni without their financial disclosures and so forth, coming to find out that Tacitus was in the midst of bankruptcy. So ajodi he has now at least shall say ni at least by these Yagos hospital needing their bankruptcy link. I believe they had control, or they bought out a couple of well sites on the nation and resold that interest back to the Navajo Nation. Not we had to purchase it, and Intech purchased those wells. Have a third person in the realm. Why don't we have all the control mechanism within the Navajo Nation? The Navajo Oil and Gas Company is an enterprise of the Navajo Nation, which is owned by the Navajo people. What up? The Nebbe has ani b'chahadit. The Nebbe kaya b'chad the other last. The Hudlon is jin. In the Ada Kahton, the Aden, the Dinshin, Sole, Adon, Konda, the Hallo, and he Gobenal Ego, Hashit Ash, ya, Eso, Kodo, Ego, Toby, Nito, Tojo, or Tojo, is Nido, Eben Nab, Oben, the Ego, the Hashipana, Sat and the Hashi Hat and Sat and I'd rather have our own tribal enterprise to be in control, all of our tribal enterprises to be in control of Navajo resources, such as, for instance, you have NECA, Navajo Nation, Navajo Engineering Construction Authority. If NECA was not there, Beso from the 121 program, Tojo, Idlin, that we are in a good position to have our own Navajo Nation resources, our Navajo Nation enterprises and control, which allows the nation to be in control of all of the resources. Oh, what happened? What happened? Oh, it's not what Shaban Socky, so Bahian, so the Stehodo, without Yedis, Kido, need Aniki Hodo, yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable Otto. So with that, let me go down. I do have Madam Chair Amber Crotty in the queue. Floor is yours at this time, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Speaker, colleagues. I appreciate the presentation. I did make a request, Speaker, if we could get a presentation that we're able to distribute to the public. I have received a few requests in terms of individuals who are interested in learning more about how helium is being developed on the Navajo Nation. And what I want to do at this time, Speaker, is actually step back and note, and as sponsor, if you could help me understand more of the history in terms of how helium development and the process here on Navajo Nation. What we're looking at is, and I'm listening, and there's not, there's some information that needs to be accurate to leadership. And I think just in terms of the process, the procedure, and what's required for the helium exploration. Some of the information also, and I'm not a shareholder, and I think, Speaker, you know my history and my opinion in terms of delegates being shareholders for the enterprises. It often leads to a position where they become the lobbying arm of the different enterprises. So I want to ask my colleagues on the call is, in terms of not just advocating for specific enterprises that you're a shareholder, the shareholder, you're a representation of the Navajo people. You're the representation of the committee. And I think in those discussions, there should be more communication with the communities in terms of the enterprises and how they're going to move forward in the communities. And the reason why I'm stating this, Speaker, and the reason why we're having, this work session is dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4 areas with one enterprise looking at, but there's other enterprises like NTEC that actually, they purchased Tacitus. So that is a Navajo Nation company. Now, I'm not a shareholder either for NTEC, and I'm certainly not here to lobby or to state that that's the route we should go as a nation. What I would like, Speaker, and as Speaker of this council, is if we could elevate this conversation where we can create a process for the helium development on Navajo Nation, so that it's not a bonanza, which is really what it's turned out to be. I represent a district that has high level of helium that possibly can be developed and explored. Now, what's happening is you have oil and gas, you have NTEC, and the communities are getting confused in terms of what enterprise and who is doing what. and that community conversation. And I've asked both enterprises to invest in having a direct community liaison with the impacted community. And as of yet, I haven't heard either of the enterprises hire that individual who comes from the community, who can provide that factual information, because it can't be board members, it can't be the CEOs. It has to be, and this is why I think we need to develop a way, how our communities ensured that their concerns are being addressed and that factual information is being presented, which will relieve any type of mistrust or misinformation. And so I'm going to ask that question of, since we have oil and gas on the line, if we have NTEC on the line, I'm going to ask them also in terms of what is their community liaison and their officer. I think chapter officials are doing their best to provide that factual information. And there's individuals who get paid to do this type of work. And when oil and gas presented to budget and finance, I specifically asked the enterprise to continue to communicate with the community on some of their concerns. And so I think that's what also leadership needs to know. About a month ago, we were invited to a discussion regarding this legislation. It was a 5-hour community discussion. And so I appreciate the additional information that was presented here from the enterprise in trying to explain, what is inert gas, what are some of the concerns that were raised in terms of water quality, the impact on the land, the roads, and just the community's prior experience with extraction. Colleagues, this is a community that in the past has been dramatically impacted by extractive industry, and we just want to get it right. And something in terms of the process and in terms of royalties, the community is also asking the nation and nation leadership to consider that the royalties go directly to the impacted community, and that then the nation can receive the community benefit that's being proposed by the enterprise. And so these are questions and why I think, Speaker, we need to start re-examining how development happens on the nation, and in terms of how are we going to build and develop communities that are directly impacted? How do we provide remediation or spaces where the impacted community can benefit, instead of putting it into a central pool of funds and the public or the community not or always wondering, when is the road going to be fixed? When is the water going to come in? Are we going to have enough scholarship money? And they want to have more of a local control in terms of those investments. And the other area, Speaker, is with helium development. I'm not sure, and I requested if there's any type of process that we need our Department of Health to help in terms of doing some assessments when it comes to impact. Although this is an odorless, non-flammable gas, one of the concerns is if there's a high level of helium in an area, that also there's an issue in terms of oxygen or the amount of oxygen that's available. And so I would want to make sure then in this process that we're conferring with our healthcare providers, and what is the best way that we could educate the community, continue to ask their questions, and just keep them engaged. And I think and this is one of those, this is one step in the right direction. So I appreciate as sponsor that you're providing this work session. The last thing I want to state, Speaker, is as sponsor, and that's a heavy lift because this is not your district. And so I would ask you to come out to the community and speak with the impacted community just to hear their concerns, and direct your agent to be able to have a constant communication to provide the information that they need. And I think there has been, and it has been acknowledged, the importance of Beautiful Mountain, and there has been acknowledged areas that were mistakenly and not intentionally surveyed. And so there does have to be more building up of trust. And so I would want to ask you, Speaker, as being the agent of this legislation, how we move forward in the Navajo Nation sense, because it's not only enterprises. I just received the Office of Minerals is working with private, I would just call them startup companies who are interested in getting their toe into the helium. And now they're requesting to meet with me and their chapter officials. And so as part of the process, so that's why I think at a higher level, I'm asking you as Speaker of the Council and of Resource and Development Committee, if the Office of Minerals are working with private entities and going through the process, that also should be provided to leadership. And that's why we need to have this high level conversation about what it is that we envision for possible helium production at the level that's being presented to the council. And then what then and how can we support communities who are going to be directly impacted? So those are my questions at this point. And if I could get that public presentation, that would be perfect. And maybe we can offer that link to the individuals who are listening via social media and other areas. Thank you, Speaker.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Speaker.
Okay, sorry. Colleagues, thank you
Go.
very much, Madam Chair Amber Cruddy, for that information and for those requests, especially the request of myself as well as a sponsor of the legislation. Let me go to Mr. El Sosi, and then I can follow up from Mr. Sosi after that. Mr. Sosi, I know that there was, I don't know, more of a comment from Honorable Otto So, but I know that there was actual questions that were coming from Madam Chair Amber Cruddy. So to you and your team, I'll go back to the presenter at this time.
Okay, here Nana Ado Shema, Delegate Amber Cruddy, quite not in kitten. AD Nitcher Zola Lenigi, Equab Benia, non social Sozagi, Epi get not this kid in outreach. How many, if the company has done that? Certainly 2019. That's when we started working with the chapter. And at that time, there was a different chapter officials then. And we had done 2 community meetings and answered all the questions that that they had. Although that a resolution was enacted of a support for this effort. And then on 2021, we did have 2 community meetings, and we had a resolution also enacted, a support, what I call. So although as far as hiring someone, certainly that is the plan. But in order for us to do that, I think a lot of the groundwork needs to be taken care of as far as making sure that we do have the operating agreement in place, and then hire a liaison, what that call. And we do have our staff from here that do community communication with the chapter officials, the grazing officer, and then on to the community members, the grazing permit holders, what that call. And a lot of the questions that come from there, from these community meetings that we had, were in regards to how safe is helium. So, well, how we respond is that it's an inert gas. It's continuously emitting. It makes it through the crust of the earth. And we breathe it every day. And it's non-toxic. If it was, then lo and behold, we won't all be here at all. It's odorless, it don't smell, it's non-flammable. And it's safe. And that's how we do present that to the people. Our Mother Earth, that's one of the concern that comes forth. Earlier, there was through the prison presentation, we had Mr. McClure alluded to medicine men, which are offering choyage, which nahatnil. In that sotizen, nahosan bet sotizen. In the yapet sotizen, nilche bet sotizen, trobet sotizen. Hot ego the question is, why do you do that? And the response would be through our tradition and our stories. We went through 4 levels of the earth. They were on the fourth world, which is Nehalkai. When that time that happened, it wasn't us as Navajo or individual human beings that came out. It was these insects, the locusts, you would have to give that offering because they're the one that won this land for us to live on. When there's going to be a disruption, you got to give your respect and give that offering to tell them that we're going to do some kind of a construction here. And then the disturbance of the land, where that the environment would be good, and then the people would be good. That's important. As for other companies, do they do that? That's a question that I have, but I don't believe they do. But this company, it does that. I'm not sure if McClure wants to add on to this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Delegate Crotty, I wanted to respond to a couple of things. First off, your request for a revised presentation. We definitely can pull out some of the confidential matters. In fact, the presentation that we gave to all the committees like Budget and Finance would be a similar presentation, but we can, I will ensure that we get that to you. I want to respond to your comment about.
And milk. I'll be right back.
I wanted to respond to your comment about the other entities. Navajo Nation Oil and Gas was set up as an entity to pursue oil and gas development on the Navajo Nation. And this is a gas that we're trying to pursue. We have the experience, my team, for the most part, is made up of individuals that have over 30 years of experience all over the world drilling for oil and gas. And until recently, when Intech purchased Tacitus, there was no other entity who had the capability to actually explore for helium in a safe manner like NOG can. Clearly, Intech, and we were informed about Intech's desire to purchase Tacitus. We were also informed that their intent was to only produce the Tosto Dome field and not try to explore beyond that. We've heard that that may be different now. Our view is that it comes to capability. We are trying to explain, this is a very difficult subject to try to explain over the internet, but we're trying to explain that the historical helium production on the Navajo Nation has come from old oil fields. And it's just been a byproduct of the oil production. What we're trying to do is much different. We're trying to actually explore for helium. And with that will come other gases, like Mr. Andreessen mentioned, nitrogen is what we expect. And so it's a much different strategy than what you're going to hear from most companies, even the startup companies. I'm not surprised that there's a number of startup companies who would love to come on the Navajo Nation and explore for helium. The reason is that it's quite profitable. And so, as such, they would like to, as Delegate Otto So said, they'll take their profit share and they'll take it off the Navajo Nation. As an entity of the Navajo Nation, as the leader of that entity, I just don't believe that is the right strategy for the Navajo Nation. When you have an entity who can develop oil or gas, and in this case, helium, and do it in a safe way and deliver those revenues to the nation, I see that as beneficial for the nation to take on business opportunities like that. We can do this safely. And as we're trying to communicate, and unfortunately, there are individuals who will never believe what I'm saying. But what we're trying to say is that this is an inert gas. It is non-toxic, non-flammable, it has no odor. And so when you hear otherwise, then you probably are in an oil field that produces some helium. So that's the difference here. Your question about whether the entities should get together and talk through this, we don't see that as our primary motive here. Our motive is to put opportunities in front of the Navajo Nation. If the Navajo Nation supports us, then we're going to move forward. If they don't support us, then we'll move on to some other business opportunity. But in our view, this is something that the council and the nation should support. And then, so the final thing was about community engagement. I think Mr. El-Sosi covered that well. I am a very transparent individual, and I am always open to meeting with the community and answering questions. We've tried to engage with the Sanasti chapter. We've tried to engage with the Tisnaspas chapter. I think the best people to advise you on whether we have been engaging with them or not is the chapter officials. My belief is the Sanasti chapter officials who are on this call and also were at our meeting in Albuquerque on Saturday have been well informed. We have tried to answer every question and will continue to do so if they have any concerns. I think it's really important that we work as a partnership with the community. We want to hear where their concerns are so that we avoid, as an operator, any sacred sites, any homesteads, those type of things. We can do that as the technology allows for that. And so clearly, if we work together, we can be successful together. So I thank you for the time to respond, and hopefully I answered your questions. And again, we'll try to get a cleaned up presentation to you as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClure, and for your comments too as well, Mr. El-Sosi, and just to answer in response to as well. I know there was a question directly to myself. Madam Chair Amber Crotty, I have no problem going before the chapter and explaining not only my position on why I am supporting this legislation, but why I'm sponsoring this legislation too as well. So I can go ahead and coordinate that effort with you and chapter officials too as well after this work session. So again, thank you very much. With that, I don't have anybody else in the queue at this time. Are there any other further comments or questions, colleagues?
Speaker Damon?
I know that there was a number of questions answered this past Saturday at a Navajo Nation Oil and Gas work session too as well. And I know a number of our colleagues were there or called in too as well. So maybe that there was a number of questions that were answered at that time. But I did want to make sure that there was a request to have a Naabik'íyáti committee work session on this as well. So I think I heard someone say Speaker Damon was.
Yes, Speaker Damon, this is Rowena Jeremiah with Minerals Department. If I may, I'd like to address some of the questions and comments that were provided.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Ms. Jeremiah. It's good to hear your voice. Thank you for being on the call. Go ahead. The floor is yours at this time.
Thank you so much, and thank you, delegates who are on the call and all the guests. I do, as I listen to Honorable Delegate Crotty and Honorable Delegate So with some of the questions and some concerns. I want to, I think it's important for me to add my position. First, I want to say that these 3 operating agreements, I totally support the approval of the operating agreements. Like Mr. McClure had said, Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company worked with the Minerals Department and the Department of Justice in negotiating these agreements. I think that the way that these agreements are written will benefit the Navajo Nation. I want to point out a question about the scholarship payments on slide number 7. Just to clarify, slide number 7 states that there's combined scholarships of $75,000 in an initial payment. Actually, it's $30,000 in the initial payment if you add up all of the scholarship payments for the 3 operating agreements. And then that's during the primary term. So the primary term is approximately 10 years. So those 10 years, the Navajo Nation will be receiving $10,000 each from under those operating agreements. So that's $30,000, not $75,000. Then the secondary term, which is after the 10 years, that's when it kicks in the $2,000 per producing well with a minimum of $15,000 and a maximum of $50,000. So that's just looking at the slides, some of the questions that I had. Another question was on slide number 12. One of the bullets indicated a 1% profit share will be paid to the chapter, which could equal up to $1.7 million. I question how that mechanism is going to work, because that is not something that the Minerals Department was part of discussions with, and I think that's something that the delegates should look a little bit more into, like how is this going to work. The other thing that I want to bring up is, as everybody knows, the Minerals Department is responsible for ensuring accountability and management of the Navajo Nation's mineral resources. So I keep hearing from different delegates about how in the past these mineral companies weren't fair with the Navajo Nation. They took the Navajo Nation's money and used it for themselves, not bringing it back or not using it on Navajo. Well, these agreements with these companies like Peabody, like Kerr-McGee, those are companies that Delegate So brought up. These agreements were negotiated in the 50s, in the 60s, long ago. And I hate to think that today's government is not more involved in the process, is not more responsible or accountable to the people, that we're not more educated about the process, including how is production measured, how do we value these minerals, what processing and transportation is included in the costs needed before to get it to market. You know, that was long ago, so I don't like making that comparison to today's government. Our Navajo Nation government today is much more advanced than we were back in the 50s and the 60s. We weren't involved in the 50s and 60s. When council was just getting created or was very new, the Navajo Nation government was just getting created, was very new. We're very different in this day and age. Even with the Minerals Department, not only do we negotiate these mineral leases, but we have several programs, compliance programs within the Minerals Department that oversee the oil and gas production activities on Navajo. So we know what is going on. We are involved. We have the Minerals Audit Program that is responsible for ensuring that the Navajo Nation is receiving every dollar that's due the Navajo Nation from every company, including Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company, from NOG, and from these other companies, which are not only just startup companies. We have other companies who are interested in developing and exploring helium that are not just startup companies. The Minerals Department, when a company comes to the Minerals Department and says, hey, we're interested in exploring for and developing oil and gas or helium, whatever the case may be, we assess each company's financial strength and technical capability. We have a lot of meetings with these companies. That's why the negotiation of these agreements takes so long, because we get to know the companies. We explain what the company's relationship should be with the Navajo people, starting with their sponsor. We tell them, you've got to get a sponsor, you've got to get to know your sponsor, you've got to let the sponsor know, what are you going to do for the Navajo people? What are you going to do for the community? We let them know that meetings should occur with the company. You've got to answer the people's concerns about their questions. They're going to be asking, well, how is this going to help me? How is this going to help my family? How is this going to help my community? So we I don't want to say educate, but we let the companies know that this is what you're in for. This is what you need to do. We also explain that the royalty dollars don't go directly to the chapters that they're going to be working with, but rather they go into the Navajo Nation's general fund account. So this negotiation of these operating agreements, you've got to do more than that. You've got to work with the chapters separately. This money that we're negotiating, the terms of these operating agreements, that money just goes into the Navajo Nation's general fund account for services to the Navajo people, as well as operation on the Navajo Nation government. And that's what we have to remember, the Navajo Nation, all of us here that are part of the Navajo Nation government, that we have to exercise care in our choices surrounding our mineral leases and operating agreements. Yes, NOG was created for the development of the nation's oil and gas resources, but we still can't ignore. Let me back up a little bit. Delegate Otto So says he supports all of the Navajo Nation enterprises to be in control. Yes, that's all we want. That's why these enterprises were created. But we're not there yet. We are not quite there yet. We can't ignore the Navajo Nation government's responsibilities to the operation of our government and to the services that we provide to the Navajo people. So with that, there's Delegate Crotty, one more thing before I move on. The Minerals Department can provide you the information that you're looking for, in addition to NOG. NOG can provide you a PowerPoint and an explanation, but so can the Minerals Department. We are here, we can go over the helium processing activities, meaning when the production comes out of the ground, what happens? How do you get it to market? What activities need to be done to get it to market? Because it just doesn't come out of the ground and then you go and sell it. No. There's a lot of activities that go into separating the helium out of the gas stream. So the Minerals Department is here to provide that kind of information to anybody who needs it. I wanted to mention that. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to say. Again, I support these three operating agreements. I don't want you to get the takeaway from my discussion that I do not support it. I do support it. But with this discussion, other comments were being put in about other companies having interest in exploring for and developing oil, gas, or helium. And there's a distinction between just conventional gas and helium. And so I thought that it's good for me to bring up these other things that I'm thinking about, that the minerals thinks about when we make these decisions about not allowing our enterprises or just allowing our enterprises to be the only companies that develop on Navajo. I'll reiterate, that is what the goal is, but we are not there yet. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. That, colleagues, I'm going back to the floor, and I don't have anybody in the queue. Anybody else speak at this time?
Speaker, Delegate Daniel So.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman. Floor is yours.
Yeah, that's Philip. Otto, and I, colleagues of the Untitled Committee, legislative staff, legislative council, and the principals of Navajo Oil and Gas, as well as Navajo Nation Energy and Minerals Department. Number one, everybody knows that I'm heavily involved in the opposition to hydraulic fracturing, as it invades and takes over the lives of the residents now of 4 chapters: Pueblo Pintado, Ojo Encino, Counselor, and Torreon Starlake. And number one, as has been presented, the horizontal development, hydraulic fracturing is not part of the operations that will be used to procure the hydrogen resources. And basically, I really feel like the aspect of UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration. So in that aspect, the part of free, prior, informed consent really needs to happen within the 23rd Council. The Naabik'íyáti Committee adopted the tenets of UNDRIP, excuse me for using the acronym, and the aspects of free, prior, informed consent. That means not in the federal definition of tribal consultation. It is actually reaching out to the people that will be most affected, and that is the community and chapter residents. And so that is one aspect that really continues to be a tenet that I support. Granted, we will have residents that will support and others who will oppose. And from there, then we may end up actually having oil and gas, Navajo Nation, have other considerations respective of the operating agreement. And in that, I think we really have to be open to listening to the people. So with that, that would be my input. And right now, the scholarship offerings is almost really minimal. I mean, just think what tuition is at some of the regional universities, and the total cost of associated to pursuing a post-secondary education. 10,000 is probably 1/3 the cost for one student to attend a 4-year institution. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward. We are in a different time, and some of these costs have really increased. So, that is one consideration that I think, since I am the chair of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. So thank you for allowing me to bring up these points in my consideration. And again, for myself, I would rather see this particular enterprise take the helium resources and have the ability to engage in to market and bring more revenues. I guess in that aspect, we separate the helium operations from the other aspects previously that exist in other operating agreements. I think we should look at, yes, royalty payments make a difference, but in the other aspects of profit sharing with the chapters and with the nation ought to be another facet of this operating agreement. That would be the extent of my comments, and as we move toward the aspects of adopting the proposed legislation, I know that we have the need for added revenues. I'm sure the committees of the council and the council itself will support it. But the facts of the matter is that the tenets of UNDRIP and free prior informed consent has to be abided by, not only at the chapter level, but at the community level, outside of the chapter proceedings, because it affects everybody. Thank you, Satilla, Chairman of the Naabik'íyáti Committee. Back to you, Satilla.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So for that, those comments, colleagues, is there any other comments or questions at this time?
Speaker Damon, this is Delegate Crotty.
Yes, Madam Chair, Crotty, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I did ask a few other questions. So I appreciate Minerals Department responding. I think in terms of my comment with startup companies, I'd like to push back and let you know that the company that you're working with that is exploring the Area and Cove chapter, that's a complete startup that has no type of I could find nothing on this company to substantiate it as a certified company. So I'd like to have a follow-up conversation in terms of your process and how you look at these businesses. And with that being said, so helium has a long history in this area. And in working with Tacitus, when they came in and taking over Poseidon Dome, many conversations. So to understand what helium is, the global market, what it takes to take it to production. Yes, these are all conversations that have taken place. So when I'm asking questions, it's not coming from a point of not understanding the history in terms of the sites that are in this discussion now, and really the adversarial role that oil and gas has had with Tacitus, and now Tacitus being completely owned by another enterprise, Entech. I'm asking leadership to take this all into consideration so that we could have a higher level conversation about how we move forward with helium for Navajo Nation. And is it in the best interest now, knowing what we know, how monies are allocated and being on budget and finance in my 7th year as a council delegate, should we continue with the policy that royalties go straight to the central government, and where then the impact is impacted communities receive limited amount of assistance? Because there is, when we talk about agreements that were made in the 50s, well, now 100 years later of our Navajo Nation government, we have to reflect and say, are our policies in the best interest of our people? And this is where I'm asking and going to ask Legislative Council, what would be the steps that I need to make an amendment if this continues to move along and has the support of the council, that the royalties go directly to the impacted communities, and that then the nation can negotiate this community base amount so they can get the $75,000 in scholarship, and the community receives the direct royalties. What policies do we need to change? And I think for Minerals Department, it's not clear either, Speaker and my colleagues, in terms of at what point is it in the best interest of Navajo Nation to keep helium in the ground at this point, knowing that it's a very rare element and that it's vital, and that in this nationwide economy, how does Navajo Nation play a part in that? How do we play a part in being in securing and making sure if we allow this now, that there's opportunities for the future for us to get a better rate of return? And I would need to know from the Minerals Department, when you assess the abilities of oil and gas to enter into this agreement, there is concerns in terms of the ability of the enterprise to actually be able to afford this exploration. And so if that has been discussed and that issue has been addressed, I'd like to receive that information. Because I think what we want to make sure is if what is being promised is then actually what will be provided, and that all of these issues have been addressed. And we do have a working relationship with Minerals Department. There is some concerns in terms of how our resources are audited and monitored And that's why I feel that the community's concerns should continue to be addressed while we talk about moving forward this legislation. But I'm also concerned that we don't have a Navajo nationwide approach on how we are going to move forward with helium. And Speaker, I'm not sure if you're having those conversations as sponsor of this legislation, and what is, because the Navajo Nation, we have an energy policy. We should have some idea on how we move forward and making sure that we are doing this at the right time and that we are doing this in a way that best supports the community and their envision on how they want to be compensated. So if I could get those questions directly answered, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Speaker. And I don't know if there's a Speaker Pro Tem. I did hear you earlier mention that you're the sponsor of the legislation. So I apologize if there's a Pro Tem Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. El-Sosi?
Okay, thank you, Speaker. I'd like to defer this to Mr. McClure.
Okay, Mr. McClure, and then I'll go to the Minerals Department.
Okay. Yeah, there was a number of comments there from Delegate Crotty. I think the one that I picked up on the most was questions about our capability to fund this activity. We have presented in front of Budget and Finance usually on an annual basis to talk about our financial statements. We can definitely pull that material and review it with Delegate Crotty again if she'd like. We are more than capable of funding this activity, plus all the activity we have planned for the Aneth field and any other activity that we have planned on the Navajo Nation. We are well financed. We have significant amount of cash in the bank, and our financial situation is as healthy as any organization I've been with in my last, recent career and at a company this size. So that's not an issue. I think that your question about, I'm going to defer maybe to the Minerals Department to talk about where Intech fits in this. Intech, their purchase of Tacitus has created a lot of questions, I'm sure. I see them as a coal entity that has acquired a helium producer. And that doesn't overnight make you an expert in helium development. We have the capability to be able to drill, produce, extract, market, and ultimately, move forward with helium development in a safe, effective manner. We've tried to hold workshops with the council members over the last several years to explain how our capability has grown over the last few years. I came in May of 2019. I built an organization that has all the qualities and quantity of resource and expertise to be able to develop any and all helium deposits on the Navajo Nation. And I'm all open for a discussion about capability, because I'm confident whenever you look at our capabilities. Unfortunately, we couldn't get into in depth today on some of the presentation materials. But if you could hear some of the technical work that's being done by NOG with a federal grant from the Department of Interior and working with the Minerals Department, I think you would be able to compare that to other operators who are trying to extract helium on the Navajo Nation and be able to determine who's doing the best job. I'm confident that we've got the capability to be able to do things effectively. And again, financial capability is inclusive of that. And we can definitely ensure that we get our financial statements over to you if you'd like to have a discussion about it.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClure. Let me go to the Minerals Department.
Thank you, Speaker Damon. So to provide a little bit background about Tacitus, I'll just start from the very beginning. So Tacitus went through some organization changes. And right after those changes, which were, they had their own reasons for going through those organization changes, but they moved people around who used to be in charge of, for instance, negotiating these agreements, for reporting and calculating, paying royalties. Then around that time, the Minerals Department, we found out that Tacitus was not calculating their royalties correctly. The value that they based their royalties on, there were costs that were being deducted from that value that shouldn't be deducted. And so for about 1 year period of time, they had to pay an additional $2 million. And then they said, well, listen, if we have to pay every single month royalties based on this higher value, it's going to bankrupt us. And we said, well, sorry, but that's what the value should be for royalty payment purposes. So just around that time too, and I don't know if that was solely the reason of their bankruptcy, but it all contributed. Then around that time, we heard that NTEC was purchasing Tacitus. Okay, so the way I see it is that although NTEC is a coal company, they're just there to finance the company, Tacitus. Tacitus still exists, kind of like their people are still there. It's not like NTEC's people's taking over. It's just that they've created an umbrella over Tacitus. So the Tacitus people that were involved with their oil and gas operations, the primary people are still there. That's how that's working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Maya. Let me go back to Madam Chair Amber Crotty. Questions were answered,
yes.
or was there something that was not answered?
Yes, Speaker, I did ask a question regarding an amendment to be developed in terms of royalties going to the chapter. What's the process to in that negotiation?
Okay, all right. Yeah, I remember that. The higher level talk about them, I mean, instead of it going to the general funds, having portions of that go to some portions go to the chapter. I would have to, let me go back to Chair Maya, to the Minerals Department, as Minerals Department's kind of in charge of that. And then I don't know if there's anyone on from Department of Justice to answer that. I don't know, there's staff they could reach out to DOJ so could answer that question. Thank you.
Speaker Damon, so the question is, and Delegate Crotty, I'm sorry, the question is whether or not royalties can go to the chapters rather than to the general fund account, and what the process would be?
Yes.
I don't I don't know what the process would be for royalties that are already going to the general fund account. I think that's a internal, there's nothing that states that it's in these agreements that it goes to the general fund account. That's just the process, the Navajo Nation's process. So for royalties to go directly to the chapters, of course, it would take some internal accounting process changes, because we would have to, right now, the way the royalties are remitted to the Navajo Nation, they're remitted to a lockbox account that we have with Wells Fargo. So that's how we identify that the royalties have been remitted by a number of companies. And there's also a report, a corresponding report, where it says these are the sales volumes, this is the sales value, this is the royalty value, here's the deductions that we took, transportation or processing deductions that we took, and all of this other information that needs to match to the actual payment document. So if everything's all good, it gets deposited into the Navajo Nation's lockbox account. And at the end of the day, all of the money that was deposited in the lockbox account, the royalty money, gets dumped into the Navajo Nation's general fund account. But that's just how it's accounted for. That's why we have two accounts, so that we can keep track of the royalty dollars. So for it to change, it's just a matter of, well, each chapter, I would imagine, would have to have their own account, and I think they do. It's just a matter of changing the process internally. Now, I don't know if there's any laws in place, any procedural laws in place that dictates that the royalties go into the general fund account, and if that has to be amended. That would be a question for Department of Justice.
Again, anybody on? Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Anybody on from Department of Justice?
Speaker, this is April Quinn from Natural Resources.
Oh, good afternoon. Good to hear your voice, Ms. Quinn. I don't know if you heard the question.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, honorable delegates. With respect to the question as to the possibility of having at least a portion or all of the royalties go directly to the chapter, I think that's something that DOJ will have to research a little bit. I'll have to consult with probably the AG and with Rod Begay, who is the head of DOJ's chapter unit, to see how something like that would work. And I can get back to Delegate Crotty once DOJ has had a chance to put our heads together and talk through that sort of thing. So thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Ms. Quinn, and thank you for being on the call. With that, colleagues, let me go back to the floor. Is there any other further comments or questions at this time?
Delegate
Yes.
Daniel So.
Yes, Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, colleagues, and folks on the call. I know that with Tacitus, their bankruptcy proceedings would have to have a court order, and thereby it being a public document. Please, Navajo Department of Justice, can you share those bankruptcy documents? And the other aspect is how then, I'm sure it talks about how NTEC inherited that particular aspect. Certainly the royalty payment should have been paid in full with no deductions. And for Tacitus having an operating agreement and not understanding that relationship then shows me that we have a company that is not, had not been fully knowledgeable of what they were signing on to, and to have tried to take operating costs out of that royalty payment is it's unthinkable. But of course, that's what happens when you choose other folks that think they are dealing with a nation that is not so knowledgeable in what royalty payments are. So in the future, Energy and Minerals, please, you're gonna even entertain any new operating agreements. Originally, they were a Canadian company, and I don't know how they basically trailed down to the Navajo Nation, but let's do our due diligence in the future. Thank you, Speaker. And again, please get us the bankruptcy court order. Thank you, Speaker. I'll go back on mute.
Thank you very much, Chairman Daniel. So with that, Chief of Staff, can you work together with Department of Justice and Minerals Department to get that information request for Chairman Daniel So, those bankruptcy documents?
Yes, Speaker, we can take care of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaker Damon, can I make a comment, please?
Yes, Ms. Chairman, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. This is just in response to Delegate Daniel So's comments that Tacitus, the subject agreement for which they did not pay royalties correctly, it wasn't an operating agreement. This was for 3 leases for which Tacitus obtained from another company. And these were 3 standard BIA leases, standard oil and gas leases. And what happened was they interpreted the lease language incorrectly. That's why they, and the regulations, that's why they underpaid the royalties. So it's based on an interpretation, but I believe, and I could be wrong, that before the assignment to these leases were from, I think it was from Bayless to Tacitus, before that occurred, NOG was given the right of first refusal, which means that NOG was asked, hey, do you want these leases? And they declined. And Mr. McClure, if I'm wrong, you can correct me now. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Chairman is correct. We did decline, and I'm sorry, Speaker Dame, sorry. Yes, we did decline, and we still decline. I think that's the point that we're trying to make. Intech did buy Tacitus, and at this point, we have no interest in the field because we don't see it as a profitable area to explore. And so this gets to some of the questions that Delegate Crotty maybe had about the entities. Our subsurface team has evaluated, and is the information that we have available on the asset that was Tacitus, now owned by Intech, and we did not feel it was a worthwhile asset to pursue. And I think this ultimately gets down to the Minerals Department. Can they possibly communicate the royalties that were coming from this field under Tacitus and what the expected royalties might be in the future? We didn't see that it was attractive enough for us to pursue. So in the history and then recently, We have had no interest in acquiring Tacitus nor acquiring their assets. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much. With that, let me go back to the floor. I do have Chairman Nez in the queue. Chairman, good afternoon. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker Damon, honorable members of the 24th Council, and then Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, as well as Ms. Chermaya and Ms. Quinn from DOJ. We did have this work session over the weekend in Albuquerque. We've had other numerous sessions on this initiative, and I would like to just express my appreciation to NOG for having to make these explorations and at the same time giving a heads up to the local community of Sonosti. I know Totalina and Two Gray Hills and one of my chapters nearby as well. It's good that they have a say, that they question, as well as Sonosti chapter officials. And we're having a really good discussion to help us understand what helium is. To our understanding, helium is non-toxic. It doesn't smell, and it seeps out through the pores, the earth. We most likely do breathe in some of it from time to time, but being it's safe, inert, this is what we were informed. And having to do our own research, we're looking and seeing what it is that in the United States, we have this supply of helium that is nowhere in the United States other than Russia. And I'm glad that NOG respectfully is reaching out to the local communities, and especially Honorable Amber Kennesbaugh Crotty. Now, my chapters over here along the river, 3 of my chapters, maybe 4, hogback a little bit off to the west. We have these industries nearby. And these industries, Navajo Mine as well as Four Corners Power Plant, APS, pays to the Navajo Nation. But within that, there are like community benefits agreement in place here that these companies provide financial assistance, whether it's scholarships or other areas to the local communities to help improve our communities, and which is good. On slide 12, bullet point, I would say number 7, 1% profit share paid to the chapter, because I'm glad we do have DOJ on the call and also Ms. Chermaya here doing the work and looking out for the nation as to what we can ask for from companies. But today, it is our own enterprise, Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, that's going to do the work. And I don't remember NOG coming before the council asking for anything, but now they want to explore and do this to help the nation generate revenue, which is a plus. When I say we, I say the 24th Council. We shut down NGS and Cayenta Mine. I say we because I am a part of that council. Even though my vote may have was different, but as a council, we do things as a council. So having said that, I believe as a council, we do need to look at this and support our own enterprise, knowing that helium is safe. And our people, when we talk to them, we speak honestly and let them know what it is. Numerous studies have been done, even by the Department of Energy, that knows that we do have a supply of helium. Los Alamos Labs also knows what we have here. So we do have a supply. And for me, I'm just glad that NOG is upfront with the people, letting them know what they want to do for the nation. When monies go into the general funds, in return, it's sent back to the chapters, whether it's for veterans or senior citizens, scholarships. But in this case, what Shemayeja is asking for, an amendment, perhaps that is something that needs to be explored. A few years ago, when Four Corners Power Plant was renewing their leases, my 4 chapters, Burnham, Upper Fruitland, and San Juan, asked for an amendment through our delegate. And at that time, we were given a report that council did not allow that they would rather have the nation receive the full benefits that go into the general fund. But now we're a new council that probably should explore that for the future of companies that want to do business on the Navajo Nation, to have some part of profit sharing given back to the local chapters communities so they can benefit and improve on what's being given to them. So with that said, Shanant, I just want to speak in support of NOG, and we're here discussing this, and I'm glad that we're asking questions, and it helps us all to understand. So that's all I wish to say, Speaker Damon, and thank you very much for giving me some time.
Thank you very much, Chairman Nez, for those comments there. That, colleagues, are there any other comments or questions at this time?
Speaker Damon, this is Delegate Crotty.
Yes, Madam Chair. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I wanted to ask our Department of Justice, Ms. Quinn, if she can provide the latest energy policy, and if that Navajo Nation energy policy, if we have any guidance in terms of when it comes to helium exploration. I just want to make sure that as we develop and have the community engage in these decisions, they have as much information that's possible, because this is not the only entity that is attempting to have permits, an operating permit when it comes to helium. And the second issue is the community did, and this is a concern in terms of how the enterprise is going to work with the community and try to rectify some of the issues. And it has been brought on numerous occasions regarding identifying Beautiful Mountain in part of this operating agreement. And I don't agree, or I need more information in terms of why a sponsor and the agents have not moved forward with swiftly identifying the areas that will be impacted and try to mitigate the issues that were raised by the community. That is still a very sore area for community members who feel that that area, a beautiful mountain, definitely should not be explored, should not be part of an operating agreement. And so I wanted to hear, sponsor, if you had any insight or if DOJ recommended to move forward. I think those are small areas that showcase or reveal how the enterprise continues to work with the community. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. With that, let me go back to Ms. Quinn. You're still online.
Thank you, Speaker. Sorry, it took me a minute to get off of mute. Thank you, Delegate Crotty, for the question. Thank you, honorable delegates. With respect to the energy policy, the most recent policy is the 2013 policy, and I can email that out to all of the delegates so that they have it readily available. I can do that right after I'm done speaking to you. And we can chat a little bit more about what is contained in the energy policy. I wasn't at DOJ when that policy was being put together, so I don't know the discussions that happened with respect to that policy. But my reading of the policy is that the current policy doesn't really talk about oil and gas. If you read through it, there's no section about oil and gas, which I thought was surprising. I'm not sure why it was excluded, but we can talk more about it. The policy does touch on oil and gas a little bit, but there are no specifics with respect to royalty payments to the chapters and anything specific related to oil and gas development. So I can send it out, and if we want to have follow-up discussions about this, we can definitely have those discussions. With respect to the second concern, I'm not really sure about. I don't have details with respect to Delegate Crotty's concerns. I don't know if I maybe need to defer to the Minerals Department to see if they have more information about that. So I think, if Rowena's maybe has that information, maybe she can help out. Otherwise, I can try and follow up with Minerals or maybe NOG. I don't have the information to know who to defer to on this issue, but I'll defer to Minerals to see if they can answer Delegate Crotty's question. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Chair Maya, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, Speaker Damon. So just to make sure I'm addressing the right question, Delegate Crotty wanted to know how, let's see, regarding Beautiful Mountain, if the community's concerns were addressed, and the Minerals Department can't answer that. And the reason why the Minerals Department cannot answer that is because we leave that up to the sponsor to take care of. Like once the companies have a sponsor, the sponsor, we understand, will guide them through working with the chapters, and so all of the concerns are at the chapter level from there. So we don't know anything about the community's concerns about developing on Beautiful Mountain. Did I answer your question?
Thank you very much, Chair Maya. Madam Chair, so for myself to go on record, I want to answer that question. I currently do not know of any position that has been taken from anybody within the community, or even has emailed or contacted myself as a sponsor of this legislation if there's any opposition specifically for Beautiful Mountain area. I'm not too sure if I can refer to Mr. James McClure or Mr. Leonard Alsosi at this time, but I don't have anybody who has contacted myself. Mr. James McClure?
Yes, Speaker Damon, thank you. I want to be clear that the presentation that I had today highlighted two maps. So let's focus on one, which is specific to Beautiful Mountain, and I think that is slide number 9 of the presentation. And there are 4 somewhat rectangular boxes on that map. That is the designated areas that NOG would be allowed to explore for helium. We have no rights outside of those red boxes. The operating agreements that we're discussing today define those red boxes by their coordinates, and that's where NOG would have the ability to develop. Now, the other thing to recognize is that there are regulations that require us to locate and define all sensitive areas prior to any development. And we work closely with the agencies and the Natural Resources Division to ensure that any of those areas are identified before we actually move out. So there's a process where Navajo Nation and the Bureau of Land Management provides us ultimately a permit. And before that permit's approved, there's a significant amount of study that goes into the permit process. Maybe now referring to your question about the community, there has been some concern that we were going to potentially do work on Beautiful Mountain. And I think that in hindsight, our naming of the operating agreement, Beautiful Mountain, maybe is at the heart of that. And you, as I think you're aware, we have agreed with the community that in time, once these operating agreements were approved, we would go through the process of having them renamed, and we would have to work with the Minerals Department to do that, and ultimately the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But I think in summary, we have no intent of exploring on Beautiful Mountain. The red boxes that are defined on these maps are the areas that we would work. We have identified sacred sites, sensitive sites, homesteads. All of those items are important for us as we go forward with the exploration area, with the exploration effort, to ensure that there's compliance with all law, and that there's agreement with the individual grazing rights permittees before we actually move on location to start development. So I hope that answers your question.
Speaker Damon, can I chime in here? This is Leonard.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Alsosi.
Yes, again, thank you for a good discussion here. Insofar as for Beautiful Mountain, that's like a hojon, that's how they address it there at the community. And we had a discussion on that back in 2019. There was a community member and a medicine man that brought up his concern as to why we're going to go up to the mountain and disrupt the mountain, along with drilling and taking helium. And he was very, very concerned about that. And with our lengthy discussion he was able to understand that we are not going to. And sadly to say, Irvin Tyler's his name, had passed on a year ago. But I did reassure him that we're not going to go up on Beautiful Mountain. And then into 2020 or 21, again, there's some medicine men that came forth, had that same concern, saying that we have sacred sites, spiritual sites, where we do offering to pray for our loved ones, for ourselves, for our people. And they said, we oppose Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company to go up to that mountain and to disrupt our way of life as we are as a Nohokat and that was what they had expressed. And we had that discussion for about a good 2-3 hours. They brought in a medicine man that talked about the formation and the spiritual structures of these mountains within the Navajo Nation. And Beautiful Mountain as one. What's that? Koho. And at the end, we told them, this beautiful mountain is going to always stay beautiful. Because we're not going to go on there. We understand and we respect and honor, and we feel that it's sacred. So that's how it's going to be. But the way that McClure did mention here is that on the base of the mountain, there's areas that are identified. That's where we're going to be at, not on the mountain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. LSOC. Back colleagues, somebody want to go floor. Any other comments or questions at this time?
Speaker Damon, this is Delegate Crotty.
Yes, Madam Chair. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I appreciate that. And so that has been a community concern. And so I hope I could get your support in terms of trying to address how Beautiful Mountain is part of this package. And if you were not aware that we could provide some additional information on some of those concerns. What I wanted to ask was the Minerals Department, if they could give me a history or understanding in terms of this plot in looking at what oil and gas provided. So in this geographic area, this northern area is called Beautiful Mountain OA. Now, is that in terms of, I am looking to modify and to accurately describe that area. And so if I would need some history and recommendations from Minerals Department in terms of how to change that name so that it is very clear that there's not consent to for activity on Beautiful Mountain. And my internet's been in and out, Speaker. So I'm not sure if you're aware, there was some unintentional surveying on the mountain. And so I think this is just in the spirit of trying to make sure that we're addressing this issue and not just saying, well, we'll get through the operation permittee stage and then we'll go back and change the name. I don't understand why we cannot, and that's why I need more information from our Minerals Department, or if it's a BIA question in terms of why that cannot be accommodated. And in looking at this, and this is what the challenge is for representing this district. There are permittees that have been identified in this PowerPoint that have stated or have contacted my office that they do not agree or have more questions on this. Speaker, can you help me understand if all of the grading permittees have signed on and we have cleared that process? When we had our meeting for the community, it was not clear at that time, and speaking with the grazing official, that all of the permittees had the opportunity. So if you could let this on this work session, if you could let us know if then we are, all of those signatures have been signed and moving forward with this project. I appreciate that. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back to Minerals Department first, and then I'll go. If there's anything from Department of Justice about changing the name, and then after that, I'll go to Mr. El-Sosi and Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Speaker Damon. So to answer the question about the name change, the only signature on the document, on the draft operating agreement at this point is Mr. McClure's. And the only reason why it was, NOG is the one that named this operating agreement, and only because of its proximity to the mountain. So the name can be changed, in my mind, very easily. We just need to, if that's the only change that's going to be made to the draft operating agreement, then we just change the name. I don't even know. I guess it would still have to go again through Resources Development Committee, but correct me if I'm wrong, April, if we would have to go through the whole process again just to change the name. But it's not something that needs BIA approval, definitely not. The name was just created because it was close to the mountain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maya. Ms. Quinn from DOJ.
Thank you, Speaker. Honorable delegates. I don't think there's a legal concern with changing the name of the agreement. I don't see any concerns with doing that. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. El-Sosi.
Yes, thank you again. In regards to the name change, the Sanasti chapter does have a resolution of which they will enact on Sunday, and that's pertaining to the name change. And at the time that we had discussion with the community, Delegate Crowdy was at one of our community meetings, and I think we had an understanding that if the name is to be changed, it could be done from the council floor by her as an amendment. So just want to, that's pretty much it. Mr. McClure, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Chairman. Really, the only thing I wanted to say were really two facts. If this process is straightforward and can be supported, we definitely would like to see the name change occur. And then to respond to Delegate Crotty's question about the permittees that are in the document, I did not intend to imply that they are supportive or not supportive. These were just simply grazing right permittees that we had approached, that we know we have to approach with our efforts. So there's no implication of whether they support or not support in the document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, Madam Chair, Amber Crotty, let me go back to you just to make sure that all the questions were answered.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I appreciate that. And so as sponsor, my hope is that your agent is briefing you in terms of what were some of the discussions and some modifications that were requested, so that you're aware in terms of how to move forward and how this legislation is going to move forward with the council or Naabik'íyáti. I did not hear the full presentation at RDC, and so I'm not sure, and I will go back to the recording. I'm not sure if the oversight was able to ask your agent if the grazing permittees were consulted. So I'll go back to that discussion in terms of, I think that's a lot of the concern is they want consultation, they want to know and get their questions answered. And I think at this time, some of them feel because they were not notified, they're very hesitant. And I think it goes back to communication and working things out and seeing how, if there's room for compromise, but we can't have those discussions if they're not part of the discussion. So as sponsor, I appreciate your willingness to meet with them. And my hope is the chapter through resolution supports the name change and that they're able to accurately provide a name that suits the community and that they have an active role. My last question would be if DOJ didn't know exactly, or minerals, for this money to go to general fund, if I could request, Speaker, I would need some assistance. I don't know if it would be OMB or the controller, but I would need to know how the policy moves forward. And if Chairman Nez, on their calendar, if RDC is going to have a conversation regarding energy policy, and then how we want to look at future distribution of these royalty and pay in lieu of taxes and the community support. I'd appreciate the leadership of resource and development. But as I said on the budget and finance, I can maybe work if there's someone that can be identified in terms of how funding, then instead of going to the general funds, could be used for the community impact. I know we've done that in the past when it comes to gaming, and there's been other agreements that surrounding or impacted communities benefit from these activities. So Speaker, if you could give me some guidance, and I think those are areas that we could follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Speaker,
just some guidance for us. Specifically, the first one on the recommendation, we definitely will, because that's something that's not only of this interest. I think it's also a combination of a couple of other delegates that would probably like to be a part of that discussion about changing some of the revenue action or the revenue generating actions and where those funds go. And as soon as Ms. Quinn is notifying the Speaker's office, we'll make sure that meeting is coordinated for that follow-up. The second thing regarding if there's any actions that needed to be taken or any recommendations that need to be taken, I do know that I will make sure that I am fully capable of being what is recommended from not only the community, but also from your stance as a representative from this community, Madam Chair Amber Crotty, and I will make sure that Mr. McClure and his team members are relatively aware and move forward in that action, so that we're fully prepared when this legislation goes before Navajo Nation Council. And last but not least, just to make sure that if there's any specific follow-ups that need to be mandated, I, as a sponsor, can work together with you or with the community if there's anything specifics, whether that be the name change or whether that be locations that needed to be identified, that need to be specifically changed. Working together with the Minerals Department and DOJ, I think that's something where we can accomplish that, especially if there's not in a full agreement from the community members on the locations or the possibility of where this actual location is, particularly for Beautiful Mountain. So with that, I don't know, Mr. Alsosi or Mr. McClure, if you have anything else to add on before I go back to the floor and give it to Mr. Otto. So,
not from me, Mr. McClure.
Not from me. I totally support Speaker Damon, what you just said about working closely with the community. I mean, that is, we've tried to engage. We want to engage. Definitely, that is something that I think when I came to this organization, we spent a lot of time early on talking about that we needed to ensure the community was aware of what we do. I know Delegate Crotty has asked the question about how much engagement have we done with these permit holders. We've attempted to reach out to all of them. We've also tried to have public forums there at the chapter house. There's times when it's been difficult to actually be able to meet with them, but we continue to make attempts, and that's something that we'll as an organization we're going to continue to do. So thank you for the support to help with that, because we know that this is an ongoing process, and the community are going to continue to have questions, and we want to make sure that we try to work with them and address those.
thank you, Mr. McClure. With that, let me go back to the floor. Honorable Otto. So.
Yes, actually, Tanan.
Oh.
You guys hear me? Okay. I really like the dialogue pertaining to leaving revenues at the local level and so forth. We know that the land is held in tribal trust, and I think if we go abroad and change the policy on the Navajo Nation, right now the policy through Department of if we could go back and have that discussion, maybe we should get these dollars put into a trust fund and have it paid out to the Navajo people as a per capita, because all natural resources, census number, why don't we do that? Right now, all of our royalty payments, whatever is coming, whatever's left right now, is going into the general fund. Appropriated as direct services. That way, we can have these dollars under a separate trust fund, and let's send out a check to when the peso to send a check out to all Navajo citizens as per capita on the royalty, because royalty in Hideki. I wish that would have happened when the coal plants were operating and the coal mines were operating. But again, the nation at the time decided, no, we can't do that. We have to put it into direct services. And I think this is where we could really have that discussion, because if we continue to not allow some of these dollars stay at the tribal government level, what programs do we try to shortcut? What social service programs do we not fund the whole program? What other programs do we not fund? Well, monies that goes to program under general funds do not get funded. Public safety, Department of Health, social service programs, other direct services. So, I'm ready to have that discussion to get these all royalty payments, whether it's oil or whether it's gas or whether it's through payments from even lease payments, business site lease payments, and so forth. We should just give it as a per capita to the Navajo people. Oh, what happened? Okay, yeah, and then yeah, again, Never Washington, they can rely on and try to provide the other direct services based off of what dollars come from the federal government and the taxes that we pick up to fund the other government here. But what happened? The other thing is that this initiative pertaining to this gas company and so forth, and I'm really glad that Department of Minerals explain how hazardous fits under the umbrella of the Navajo Technical Energy Company. They're still in there. Just pass the buck on to Navajo Technical Energy Company. In this case, we don't have that under this lease operating agreement. Whatever is approved, resources will directly benefit the nation. Another option is to have a discussion pertaining to putting all of the resources into direct services and this earmark, just like gaming. The revenue sharing that happens with the state. Maybe we can directly put these monies into pots of dollars or pots so that further identified where it funds public safety directly, where it funds social service programs abroad, where it funds education, where it funds community development, and where it funds infrastructure. There's many ways that we can have this discussion, and I'm glad that the diversity, and I'm glad that the thinking outside the box right now is here, because change and fish on the Congo. Every year the Navajo Nation Council comprehensive budget we fund the tribal government and operation and services to address these needs that the Navajo people really need. But the individuals that are supposed to provide these direct services and this is the reason why you have chapters asking, we want to share part of that. The other thing too also is that so the Department of Justice made an opinion, and that opinion is still valid, indicating that the chapters are not part of the three-branch government. And I think we really need to identify and change policy so that the chapters are part of the three-branch government, so that things like this at the local level can happen. We can allow funds to stay at the local level to benefit certain direct services at the local level, or put all royalty payments to pre-planning, getting the pre-engineering work out of the way. But the way I see this right now, it's going to benefit the scholarship program. And whether the child is from Western agency or Eastern agency or Northern agency or from what agencies, they all benefit. I got the tribal scholarship. Yesterday, I got a phone call from a lady, a girl that goes to school at NAU, who was trying to get groceries from Kayenta, Arizona. My scholarship payment hasn't come in from the Navajo Nation. I'm sort of running low on some food money to know. She said, "What's all that?" Yeah, Ladini. All righty then. Go ahead and try to. I'll go ahead and try to help you. That's what I mean. These direct services, fun that they don't get the resources out there on time, or they don't get the resources out there, and you have kids asking for money. I know she comes from a family that okay, even now what up about Saki. Now your father isn't late. Go up and who had not see the nothing, the nay, nothing, stayed on the dog. Say, but the child then. Go up, baby, Hannah Shananta. It is now about this to hear.
Thank you, Honorable. So with that, go back to the floor. Any other comments, colleagues, at this time? If not, let me go back to Mr. Associate and Mr. McClure for closing remarks. And if there's anything else from Department of Justice or from the Minerals Department as well.
Mhm. I'll have Mr. McClure go first, and then I'll go last. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to really have nothing new to add. Just want to thank everyone for the discussion today. I think it was very effective. We've really welcomed these opportunities to answer questions and try to explain what we're attempting to do. We understand that this is it's a complex topic. Drilling in the subsurface several thousand feet to extract helium. Me and my team, we've done it all over the world, so we're very comfortable with the language, but we recognize that when we have conversations like this with those who maybe don't have the experience in our industry, it's a difficult topic to explain. So hopefully we did a good job or did a decent job of trying to do that today. We are always open to answering any questions that the delegates may have on this topic and the community. And we look forward to the process continuing to a final decision. So thank you for your time.
Again, yes, Speaker.
Go ahead, Mr. Elson.
Okay. Certainly, I do appreciate the council delegates that are on the line here, and then also the Navajo Nation staff from Minerals, Department of Justice, and also the Office of Legislative Services. We do appreciate your help and also helping us to answer some questions that were asked by the delegates. And then also the board of the company is very supportive of helping the Navajo Nation. And I believe we did by what hiring Mr. McClure to help us with these efforts and these initiatives that we have outlined. And certainly I believe that Navajo Nation Oil and Gas Company is the company of the Navajo people. The Navajo people are the shareholders. And certainly when we talk to the people out at the chapter and community level, we always say to them that the company the company Sato na sadla Naabik'íyáti Banaha enda Koja Beikit Laslikido Edo Bena Hot Jutabadi Nendla. So with that, would you continue to solicit for your support to help the Navajo Nation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else from either the Minerals Department or Department of Justice?
This is Rowena with Minerals Department. I just want to add to the conversation about having perhaps some future royalties going directly to the chapters, or like Delegate Otto had mentioned, that maybe into some kind of fund that directly impacts the services that are provided to the Navajo people. I just want to, I guess, remind everybody that the current royalties that the Navajo Nation receives, it falls in a category that is just second behind rights of ways and land rentals in funding the Navajo Nation's general fund account. The meaning that that's where the bulk of our revenue comes from. That's for instance, our 2022 budget, our 2021 budget. It falls just second behind rights of ways. So we need to be careful on how we think about this. It's a great idea, but let's not jump too fast. And I also want to thank everybody here. I do think it was a great discussion, and I look forward to more discussions like this. I again reiterate that I support these operating agreements as they are written, that they be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. And thank you for you being representing the Minerals Department today. Ms. Quinn, I don't know if you had anything to add on.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, man. Well, thank you, Ms. Quinn, for being on the line. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of the discussion today. With those, I think that the staff has a couple of directions and follow-ups before this legislation again, or by the time this legislation gets to council, so that we go ahead and be prepared. So again, thank you to everyone for being a part of the work session today. And thank you for being a part of the session. If you were this past Saturday directly with Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, and if there's any questions or concerns that are specific, Mr. James McClure and Mr. El Sosi are stand fast at any time to answer any of the questions. Colleagues can reach out to them. Maybe James, if you could send your email out again to everyone on the members of the Naabik'íyáti committee, so that we can go ahead and if there's any comments or questions, not only on this or any other items that are going on with Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, we can go ahead and provide that. So we got follow-ups for Madam Chair, follow-ups for Chairman Daniel So, got follow-up for Honorable Otto So. So we definitely will have staff work on that, getting that information to everyone. So again, yeah, everyone, thank you for being on the line today. Moving on down, colleagues, we are on announcements and adjournment. If there's nothing to announce, we can go to adjourn.
Motion.
Oh, we don't need a motion. We'll just journey here then at 4:07 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Tomorrow there is a Naabik'íyáti committee meeting starting at 10 a.m. And we'll have a couple of items on there for reports. And I do believe there's about 7 items on the agenda that are ready to be presented. Legislations I mean, and I think there might be some more. So again, colleagues, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, and thank you very much. If you're on the road, safe travels. We'll see you when we see you. We're going to have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.